Hey there, Fletch from All Things Overlanding here, and today I'm going to be talking about something that's a little alien for me. And I'm going to start by apologizing because I have been a huge gearhead. I've talked a ton about modifications, do-it-yourself stuff, gear in general, the changes that I'm making to my setup constantly, right, for 4 or 5 years. And the reason I'm apologizing is because I feel like that and a lot of other YouTubers out there that are like, get the bigger, better thing all the time, right, can push some of us to get into that loop. And I myself was in that loop too. And so as I've kind of started to rebuild this new truck, I've started to really think through my setup. And so that's why this week I wanted to talk more about reducing complexity and simplifying your overlanding setup. The benefits, how to do it, what to cut back on, and sort of the way forward, right? So if you want to learn more about how to simplify your setup, how to maybe get started and do it in a smarter way than a lot of us have done and not get sucked into that, sort of vibe of constantly improving or adding to your setup, stay tuned. All right, so as I mentioned in the intro, today I'm talking about simplifying and just reducing complexity in your overlanding setup. Like I mentioned, I've talked about this stuff for a long time, and it has taken me years and years to kind of get to that point where I'm almost exhausted by it, right? Like, honestly, I kind of feel like what pushed me over the edge, what I was thinking about the other day was a shower system that I've got. So I've got one of those kick-ass heated, propane water heater things for a shower. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, I'm going to install this thing. Maybe I've got this big 2-week Canada trip coming up. This is when I'm going to really need it, is on a trip like that. And then I'm looking through it, I'm reading through it, and I realize that I have the version that doesn't have a pump with it. And I'm like, shoot, okay, I got to get a 12-volt pump. And then I got to have a water source. And then I got to figure out, how do I run the pump and run this and get the propane hooked up? And do I need to get a Plano crate or like a Pelican case to mount this heater in? And then I've got to remember it, and I've got to remember all the auxiliary stuff that goes with it, and I've got to pack it every time that I want to go. And honestly, how often do I even use that, right? Like, outside of this 2-week Canada trip, most of my trips are 2 to 5 days, right? I could probably get by with some dude wipes, honestly, right? And for the cost and just the hassle and packing it and having to have the space for it and everything, that's what kind of made me start thinking like, whoa, bro, you need to slow down, you need to back up a little bit, and you need to think about this thing, right? So that's what kind of prompted this whole thing. But then the more that I got to thinking about it, the more that I started to realize just how complex and like overly built everything was on my old truck. And again, getting into this new build, now I'm thinking like, do I want to do that? Like, with this Canada trip coming up, I've got about a month and a half still left before that trip starts. And, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking like, I need to lift the truck, and I need a bumper, and I need to put my winch over there, and I need to build a drawer system, and I need to move my Red Arc stuff over from the old truck, and I need to do all these things, right? There's so many, it's like I have a huge list of things that I think I need to do before this trip. And I was talking to a buddy of mine a few weeks ago, and he was like, you don't need any of that for the Canada trip, right? Like, it is really remote, so you need reliability, which is part of why I bought the new truck. You need good gas mileage, which the truck has, and actually a lot of the modifications that I have in my mind to do to it are going to reduce that fuel efficiency, right? So, then again, I'm like overly complexifying. That's not a word. I'm making my build overly complex just for the sake of like having to have a cool rig, or, to be so prepared that just in case anything ever happens, that I've got something on my truck that can handle that. When 98% of the time, I will never need one of those 8 things that I think I need, right? So let's start with talking about how can you cut back. And I will say, again, I have a lot of ideas. I think I might be a little OCD, maybe a little bit ADHD. I'm not sure, but I am starting to think about maybe I should go see a doctor, because I can't, even as I'm sitting here talking to you guys, like, I'm looking at stuff on my desk and thinking, oh yeah, I need to install that. Like, I'm all over the place. But that happens a lot with my build too, where like, I'm like, oh, I need to do this thing. Oh, I need to do that. And then I'll order something off Amazon, and then I order something from somewhere else. And then I've got all this gear inbound, and then I'm like, okay, now I got to go do that work. I got to put this thing in. And every time I do that, I feel like I make my vehicle a little bit less stable, a little bit worse, Like, if you've ever modified a vehicle and kind of gotten a little over the top, sometimes you feel like, oh, I didn't make it better, I actually made it worse. So as far as how to cut back, part of that I think is slowing down, right? So that's what I'm starting to tell myself too, is as I'm building out these lists, like, I enjoy this stuff. So again, I'm not trying to, poop on anybody's parade here, but I don't think that's the phrase. I'm not trying to rain on anyone's parade here or poop on their parade, either one. But because I enjoy it too, right? Like I enjoy building my rig. I enjoy making lists of things that I want to do to the rig. But the difference I think is instead of immediately like snap judgment, I'm going to go spend $100, $200, $500, $1,000 and go buy this thing because I'm really excited about it. And I just watched a YouTube video where somebody used this thing or it, it seemed to solve a lot of my problems. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to put it into a list of like future modifications. And then I'm going to really think about it, right? I'm going to stop thinking about just that one thing. I'm going to think about the whole truck as a whole. I'm going to back up even further. I'm going to think about what kind of trips do I really go on? How often do I really go? How often would I use this thing, this modification, this upgrade, this piece of gear, right? And I'm going to really slow down and think about that stuff. I'm going to think about, how hard is it going to be to remember all this stuff? Is there a lot of components that go with it? Do I need, again, some sort of like a storage thing for this item or this piece of gear or whatever, so that I make sure that I bring everything with it? Like my diesel heater, I forgot things for that multiple times because I've got a box of all the plugs and the hoses and everything, and then I've got the diesel heater, and then I've got the way that I attach it to my rack and all that stuff. There's just so many moving pieces that it's really easy to miss stuff or forget stuff. So, thinking about how often am I going to use it? How long are my trips going to be? How useful is it going to be? Using the shower is a really good example, right? Again, this Canada trip is the longest trip that I've ever been on. Before that, about 5 days. About 5 days consecutively. Driving probably about, I would say, a couple thousand miles over 5 days. We did a lot of driving. It was 10 hours away to West Virginia that I went to. And that one I could have used a shower, but you know what we ended up doing instead? We went out for the first few days of the trip, and then like day 4 or whatever, we stayed in a state park that had showers. We just used their showers. I didn't need dude wipes. I didn't need a shower at all. I didn't need any of that complexity, right? I didn't need to worry about powering a pump and bringing propane, having enough propane to cook on and run a heated shower and have a shower tent that comes off the side of my truck. That's an additional cost. And I mean, that's where I think a lot of us get hung up, right? And we build our rigs and we're like thousands, tens of thousands of dollars into modifications for these things. And that's where that meme and that joke comes from, where it's like, oh, I bet you need all that stuff to get to the mall, or, I saw you at the Kroger parking lot, or whatever the case may be, right? We build these things up so much, and then we get them built, and we're like, oh, that thing is so cool, I love it. And then they're like, how much do you use that shower on? And you're like, never. How often do you use that shower that you got? Oh, I bring it like once a year, twice a year, right? Like, again, what I'm saying does not apply to everyone, so I just want to caveat with that. I want to say, like, if you are someone that goes frequently, if you live out west or something and you go on 1 week, 2 week trips, or you work from the road or live out of your vehicle, of course, right? A shower would be super handy, and that would be a killer for you. In that case, there may be other things that don't work for you. In my case, because I'm more of a dad weekender, overlander, right, that tries to get out for like 3 or 4 day trips a few times a year, maybe a big trip like this 2 week Canada trip once a year, and then the rest of them are 1 or 2 nighters, right? Like, being honest, right? I'm not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes and act like I'm some crazy overlander that travels the globe or anything like that. I'm not Expedition Overland, right? Not yet. Someday. But you need to think about how often you're going to use it, how much sense does it make, and do that before you get too excited and you just go out and you buy the thing, right? Like, again, I have a garage full of stuff right now. If you are interested in gear, send me a DM, send me an email at allthingsoverlanding@gmail.com, ask me what I got. I'm sitting here in my office right now and I'm surrounded by boxes of stuff. I have 200-watt portable solar panels brand new in the box that I've never opened. So, we gotta, I'm trying to help you guys here, right? Like, I have a disease, and I'm trying to help you guys diagnose this disease of overbuying, overcomplicating, overspending, and help you kind of cut back a little bit on that. So next, let's talk about what to cut back on. Now, again, as I mentioned, this is gonna be different depending on your situation, right? When I go through these things, I'm gonna tell you the things that I'm thinking of, the things that I have from previous builds that I'm, contemplating whether I put them on the new build or not. But again, don't take these as like an affront or, like I'm trying to offend you or start an argument. I mean, post up in the comments below if you really disagree or think that one of these things is something that I should have no matter what, right? But I'll go through kind of the things that I've got. So I did recently get a Zero Breeze air conditioner, and actually I am really excited about it because I never go in the summer. Like, I'm missing out on a good 4 to 6 months of every year because I just refuse because it's miserable, right? Like, between the rain, the bugs, and the heat, I'm out. Right? Like, I just don't enjoy it. I can deal with the bugs, I can deal with the rain, but being hot and miserable all night, like last year, I went on a couple of 2 or 3 night trips, multi-day trips in the summer, like June, July, and August in Indiana. And I was like, by day 2, I'm like, I remember now why I hated this. This is miserable, right? Like you're just sweating in your tent and you get up and you're all gross and sweaty the next day. You got to go hit the trails and go back into the tent and sweat your butt off. So the Zero Breeze for me is going to be a game changer for that, because it is going to open up a new realm where I couldn't have gone before. But it is a lot of complexity, right? Like I am definitely adding a lot of complexity to the setup. Now, again, I think it'll be really good because for me, it opens up a whole new block of time when I could go camping when I previously wouldn't. But again, you're going to have to bring power. You're going to have to charge it. You're going to have to bring all the pieces to it, the hoses, all that stuff. I mean, it's a pretty sizable piece of gear. So again, just think about that. If you are someone that lives out west and it's really hot all the time and you get 8, 9, 10 months out of the year where it's really hot, and that would be something that could save your trips for you, then of course that makes a ton of sense and you should get that. In that case, maybe a diesel heater is what doesn't make sense for you, right? So that is one of the things that's on my kind of list of like being smart with, right? And using it as necessary, but not trying to bring it on every trip or overcomplicating the things that I have to bring. If it's going to be down in the 40s and 50s and 60s one night, probably don't need it. If it's going to be, 70s, 80s at night, yeah, I'm going to bring it. The shower, as I mentioned, definitely another thing that for me is just needless complexity between having to have a water source, the pump, the heater itself hooked up to propane, how to store it, how to travel with it, how to bring it, how to keep it out of the dust and dirt and stuff. Do I buy a whole nother case? I mean, I'm going to be, by the time everything's said and done, between the pump, the water heater, some sort of a case to carry it in, right? Like I'm probably going to be $500 into this thing. And I mean, again, I would say, if I'm being extremely honest, I would be lucky to use that once or twice a year. So like, is it worth $500 and storing this thing the 11 4/5 of a month out of the year that I don't use it? Like, no, really, it's not. So that's another thing that I'm going to be cutting back on for sure, and probably something that a lot of you don't need too, unless again you're out west or you go on longer trips than I do. Lights is another thing that I am really bad about. I've probably got in my truck, in my backpack, on my Molly panel on the back of my seat. I mean, I've probably got 4 or 5 different flashlights. I've probably got 2 or 3 different lanterns. I've got built-in lights all over my truck. I've got area lights. I'm sitting here and in my mind, I'm going, I need to get a Devos Light Ranger. I need to get this. I need to get that. I need to get new lights for inside of my new rooftop tent that I'm going to be getting. Like, my brain is going through all this stuff, and I'm looking at gear all the time. I'm adding things to my Amazon list, right? Like, oh, I should get that. But really, I don't need all that stuff, right? Like, I might need a decent headlamp, and then I've got area lights on my truck already. Maybe a lantern for sitting around the fire if you really want. I have this BioLite Aspen Glow thing that's actually really cool that you can shake to change the things. I did a video on it. I'll put a card up here if you want to go look at it if you're on YouTube. But it's a really neat little lantern that does a lot of cool stuff, especially if you have kids and stuff. It has like different modes that you can kind of let them play with, put it in their tent, and they can have fun with. But it's just a nice little lantern with a big battery in it that lasts for a long time and is really nice. But I don't need 4 of those, right? I don't need a separate light for my tent, a separate light for area lights, and a separate Devos Light Ranger to put over here, and this and this and this and that. Now, if you didn't have the area lights on your truck, like a Devos Light Ranger would be great, right? So again, I'm not saying anything bad about any of these products or don't buy any of these products. I'm just saying think about your setup and make sure that you don't have so much redundancy that you're just taking like copious quantity of backups for things, which is what I tend to do. So those are the things that I'm going to be cutting back on. Now, finally, let's end up with kind of like what's the way forward, right? So as I mentioned, I'm going to be slowing down. I'm going to be thinking a lot more about my overall setup. I'm going to be thinking a lot more about my trips and stuff that I have coming up. So like already, I know pretty much my whole year. I'm going to try and get out sometime in June probably just to test the new rooftop tent, to test some of the new stuff before I go on the Canada trip, just to shake everything down one last time. So that'll probably happen. Then I've got Canada in July. That's going to be 2 full weeks. So I'm going to learn a ton on that trip. Probably going to come back and spend the next 2 months revising my setup, changing up my stuff, making sure that stuff is the way that I want it. Again, though, instead of just immediately coming back and buying $400 worth of stuff on Amazon, I'm going to come back, I'm going to make a list, I'm going to really think through it, think about what do I need, why do I want it, right? What is the importance of it? How often will I use it? All that sort of stuff before I make any purchases. And then I'm going to buy and sort of tweak my setup from there. Then I've got Core in September, middle of September. That's 10 hours away to the UP of Michigan. Be up there for about 4 or 5 days. It's going to be amazing. I love that event. I go every year. But so I'm excited about that too. So I'm going to have this 2 week and I'm going to have a 5 day. So I'm going to have some big events coming up. And then of course, in between there, I'll have a ton of overnighters or 2-nighters and things like that. Also with the new truck now and the better fuel economy, I'm going to be exploring a lot more. So I'm planning to get outside of Indiana and go into like Ohio and Illinois and checking out some other areas. So thinking through those trips and thinking towards me, you know, my kids getting a little bit older, me getting a little bit more towards being able to do this maybe for slightly longer each time, maybe a 3 or 4 day trip instead of a 1 or 2 day trip more often, then I'm gonna have to think through my needs again. They may change, right? So, but that's my way forward, is slowing down, really thinking about not only my trips, but what I need and how often I need it and how much it takes to pack it and how much I have to remember. Trying to make things simpler, right? Like I'm just trying, my goal with all of this, and I think your goal, you know, just as a general thing, should be to have fun, right? To have fun and get out there and go as simply as possible. It shouldn't be stressful, right? Like that's right now I'm thinking about this Canada trip and I am stressed out because I'm like, I gotta do all this stuff. I can't go on this trip without this and 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 this. And I got this whole list, right? And that's not true. It's not true. And I've said that, to be honest about my message, for a long time. I've always said, like, just get out with what you got, right? And that is true. But now after all these years, I'm like, but I need this and I need my red arc and I need my dual batteries and I need all this stuff. But you really don't. Right? And maybe you do, and if you do, then think through your list, and if that's a priority, do it, right? But again, think about simplifying, think about getting out there and having fun more than delaying your trips because you're not ready, right? It goes back to my old message of like, just get out and explore. So again, hopefully that is kind of inspirational. Hopefully that makes you think a little bit, right? About, oh yeah, I don't need to wait 2 months to go on this trip because I'm waiting on a lift or a suspension piece or this or this or that. Obviously, if it's maintenance stuff and your truck's going to break down, yeah, don't go. But if it's, I need a hot water heater and a shower and a pump, and I need to build this whole system and a way to store it and all this stuff on my truck, no, you can get out there and just enjoy yourself. You don't have to have all that stuff. So again, that was the episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're on YouTube, thanks for listening. If you're on the podcast, I appreciate you guys, and I couldn't do this without you. So if you are on YouTube, hit the like button, drop a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you, even if it's I enjoyed it or I hated it or whatever. Drop a comment, that helps a ton. If you're on the podcast, of course, you know, hit the review button, leave a 5-star review. That helps a ton too. I appreciate it. Also in the description down below are going to be links to all my social media channels. So wherever you want to hang out, if you want more all things overlanding, I'd love to have you come join me over on those channels. There's also a Patreon with a Discord. We talk all the time. We've got an exclusive Discord for Patreon folks, so if that sounds interesting, check that out. And then there's the Newbie Overlanders Facebook group. It's growing like crazy every day, but it's different from the big groups. We don't allow bullies in. We're not have a ton of people self-promoting themselves in there. So it really is about like newbies and helping each other and helping people with their gear setups and things like that. So we'd love to have you over there. So but again, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we will see you guys next time.